Telling a story isn't about perfection, it's about communication. It's about our shared moments together. Hi, my name is Jeff Price, and I would like to welcome you to Intentional Musicianship, where we look at everything that goes on at center stage and the preparation behind the scenes needed to transform your performance into an unforgettable experience. I am here to encourage you, support you, and generally have a great time being united together with you through music. After a wonderful performing career as a storytelling musician around the globe, my joy is found empowering musicians to find the freedom to go beyond the music stand and the fourth wall of the concert stage to better engage with their audience members. This podcast isn't a classroom, it's a brainstorming session, and it is meant for musical performers of all ages. Together, we'll explore performance practice, stagecraft, the nuances of storytelling, and the strategies for genuine audience engagement. We're here to discover what truly makes a live performance resonate. Today we're going to talk about what our customers want through a thing called the Kano model that's used in business. Now, the funny thing is when I think about what our customers want, I think of the 80s and I go to a song by Cyndi Lauper called Girls Just Want to Have Fun. I think of like the words, when the work and the day is done, girls, they just want to have fun. I know I'm a girl dad. I've been married 28 plus years. Weird things come into my head. That's just sort of sometimes how things work. She had a unique character about her with the makeup and her clothing, joyful dancing. I really liked her accent. And it was interesting because then even in her videos and stuff, I saw her with Captain Lou Albano. And then I saw her in all these different rock and wrestling connection with Wendy Richter and Roddy Piper and Bob Orton, Mr. T and Hulk Hogan. And it's just sort of interesting. Now, I know that's a weird aside, but it is really important to understand our customers. And sometimes they just want to have fun. So as you look to your storyboards about your programming and you work on your transitions and you work on your performance and how you're communicating and presenting yourself on stage, we really need to understand who we're playing for and what they want. The goal from wanting to know what that customer wants is so that you can build that relationship and you can build on those experiences that you'll have together during that very small block of time. So, okay, now we're going to get back to this episode and we're going to talk about this thing called the Kano model. And every time I bring up a weird business concept on this podcast, I'm not trying to dive into anything that would be so complicated. I always look at things from where I am as a musician, but I have a master's in music. I have a master's in human resources. And I try to bridge some of those different things. And we all have a lot of lifetimes of experiences that we use when we look at things. And so it's okay to bring what you have to the table and just sort of try to put some things new into your paradigm of what you're thinking about. And so this is just a tool, and that's all I'm doing is to present it as a tool, and we're going to hit some of the outliers of these things, and maybe they might be useful to you or maybe lead you to research it more. This is my one aha moment. I remember looking at it, I go, I can use that with music. I know I can. But, it's used in total quality management, and we're trying to get better, improve. And one of the things we have to do is understand this voice of the customer. And in live music, the most important thing we need to address in our preparation is how we engage and communicate with our audience members. Otherwise, we could just stay in our practice room or submit a recording and call it a day onto social media. Now, those other art forms and mediums are really great, but there's nothing as connective as that human-to-human connection that we have when we perform for a live audience. And it's funny, that excitement of anything can and will happen, I don't know about you, but that sort of drives me. I like that unpredictable, predictable nature that I prepare and then anything then happens. Now, this Kano model, it's how customers perceive quality. And there are 3 terms that we're going to identify that are important with this. The first one is called a dissatisfier. It's a basic quality attribute. These are the things that have to be present. Otherwise, the customers are going to be dissatisfied. An example of this is when you go to a hotel and you expect your rooms to be clean. Now, if the sheets are a mess, this will be a dissatisfier. And along with other small events, or maybe this big major event, you could choose not to ever go back to a hotel again. Now, a dissatisfier, just by eliminating them, does not mean that the customer is going to have great joy, because It's an expectation that you're going to have clean sheets in a hotel room when you purchase the hotel room. So you have this second term, a satisfier. And as we were hinting at, it's a norm. So if a dissatisfier is an unclean room, a satisfier is just what is expected. It's a clean room with clean sheets, clean towels. You don't really get a bonus for having a satisfier. And then we have this third thing, and it's called an exciter. It's something where you go above and beyond what the customer expects. This might be when you go to a hotel and when you check in and you have 2 free tickets to go play a round of golf, or maybe you go to the spa. Now, a peculiar thing about this model is that expectations can change over time. For example, in the old days, air conditioning used to be an exciter for a hotel. Now, it is a norm. And if it doesn't work, it can definitely be a dissatisfier, and you might choose to never go to that chain again. In the same way, Wi-Fi used to be an exciter, but now it's a norm. And if it doesn't work, it can really be a dissatisfier. A lot of people expect things to be there, ready to work, ready to go. Now, in the same way, depending on the location, a complimentary breakfast might have been the norm, or it could have been an exciter. It just sort of depends on the kind of hotel and the expectation that the audience has for the event. So you might have different expectations when you pay $50 for a hotel room versus $100 or $200 or $300. I remember being a maid in Yellowstone National Park, and the very cool suite that in the old days, this is 1991, it was $300, and that was a lot of money. And I remember cleaning that room because they had bonbons and pictures of the park, and there were just a lot of things that made this room uniquely special. Plus, when you got it, it took you over an hour and a half to clean, where a normal room, you only got 30 minutes. So when we apply this kind of stuff to music and our live performances, you're going to have to brainstorm about what things might fit in this category. At first, you might say that a dissatisfier is a wrong note, or being out of tune, or that the blend between you and the piano is just off a little bit. The interesting thing to remember about this is who your customer is and what audience came to your show. You got to almost always remember audience members are really tolerant. Another word is charitable, understanding, appreciative, and they're supportive because they've made the choice to attend your event. For example, let's look at my mom, my Aunt Pam, my Aunt Sherry, and my Aunt Vicky. When they come to the show, they come to be part of the community. They come to support the musicians. They come to be entertained. And you know what? They're happy with the efforts of the musicians. The funny thing is each of them is supportive in their own way. My Aunt Vicky was a trained pianist, and so she'll listen to things from a different musical way than my other aunts and my mom. But in the end, she's going to recognize your effort and dedication. But she might recognize some of that nuance of that performance that you're really hitting on. My Aunt Sherry, she's going to go 4, 5, 1,500 miles just to see you upon an invitation because she wants to support you. I know she likes a good show. She likes to be entertained. So if you put some wow factors in it, she's going to be really appreciative. But if not, she's good to go too. Now, my mother, she's going to come and be a part of the community. She's going to engage everyone in the audience, and she's going to learn about everyone on stage and all the bands and performers. And then she's going to get in the receiving line at the end of the show, and she's going to talk to you and tell you all the things she heard from your grandma Irma. Now, my Aunt Pam, she really loves music, and it makes her so happy. And she's so supportive of everything. She's written lots and lots of songs and really impacted education in West Virginia. If you're a fourth grader, you might know Proud of West Virginia or Grafton, My Hometown. The Proud of West Virginia has all the 55 counties. It's a way that West Virginians learn about their state. And she's my favorite musician ever because my Uncle Lloyd and her really influenced me when I was a young kid. But the funny thing about that, she's just a church pianist. She plays the melody in her right hand and some chords in her left hand. She's more brilliant than she'll ever admit to, but she just plays the basics. Now, she's, again, is going to be appreciative of everything that you do. But the one thing you got to do is you got to get her home by 6 p.m. Now, you'll oftentimes hear them make comments about how professional someone looks or how something went. They'll mention the pieces that they liked or what things happened in the program that really wowed them. But again, they came to hear you and your show. They want to be part of the community. They want to be engaged. They want to come and support you and encourage you as the performer. Now, if you happen to be at a middle school, a high school, or a local college, and you're a band director or an educator, you got to understand your patrons are going to be really, really happy. They're really not going to complain about a lot of wrong notes. They're here to see all of the participants, all of their kids and their family members. So when you think about what they want, you're not going to hear a lot of complaints from the patrons about wrong notes or tuning or balance or blend. And so within this model of dissatisfiers, satisfiers, and exciters, you might have to change your thinking of what things that kind of customer wants. Because you know what they want. They want easy parking. They're concerned about making sure that they know where the location is. They might be more concerned about the lines of the bathroom or the length of the show. Now, you might say, what does this have to do with my intentional musicianship? And I would just counter to say, you got to plan and storyboard effectively for your audience. Now, you got to control the things that you can control. And, whether that be how you perform and how you present yourself on stage. But as you plan for your show, you might want to take some time to understand some of those logistics about your theater and about the parking and about the bathroom situation. And when the doors will open for the crowd, how tickets are going to be dispersed. And that might mean that, as you're figuring out things to do before a show, you might send your band members out to seat people and give the audience directions to their seats. You might affirm things in your narration between events about what's happening and how long the intermission is going to be. And don't worry, they're going to have time for that restroom break. Now, if I happen to be at a competition or something, obviously, if your judges are your audience, those dissatisfiers, satisfiers, and exciters are going to be completely different. They're going to be weighted differently because the event is different. You know your audience and you're trying to figure out how to overcome those things. And the same thing, if you had an audition, that audience is that panel, and you're going to have to deal with things in a different way because there are different expectations. I remember sitting on tons of audition panels in my time in the Army Field Band in DC, and it was interesting to hear the comments of the committee members of these brilliant musicians behind the screen. And sometimes you could just see everybody's personalities come through from that panel and what they were hearing, and you could hear their background and the things that they liked. Now, you can't really overcome those things unless the panel asks you, hey, can you play that without vibrato? I know they did. I played like a French saxophonist, and I remember I was fortunate enough, they said, hey, can you play that again with no vibrato? And I did, and that was one of the factors of me earning the position. Now, getting back to what a dissatisfier could be, I've only seen it 2 times live, and I was a part of both of them, once as an audience member and once as a participant. So the first, I was on a national tour, and we were in Naperville, Illinois. It was a community college. It's like a gymnasium, and it was a Sunday matinee, and those shows were meant to be around an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes in length. The music was supposed to be patriotic with an Americana influence, light and delightful, and really engaging. We wanted to have the audience leave wanting more. Now, the leader of that concert that day really wanted to put the heavy stuff on the program. So this normal hour and 15-minute show raised to 3 hours in length. You knew that might be a problem because the audience was getting ready for a 2:00 matinee, and they weren't going to get out till 5, I was thinking to myself. Now, the show started out with like the entire pictures in an exhibition, and it followed up with some vocal solos, another second overture, which was by Wagner. I think it was the Tannhäuser overture. And then we finished up with another couple overtures to end the first half. And we finished the first half around an hour and 15 in. Now, the funny thing is the program didn't even list the movements for the pictures and exhibition. So people really had no idea when it was going to end. And that was just a way to not meet audience expectations and to have some dissatisfiers going. Now, because of the length of the time and because the audience didn't quite understand when this show was going to end, because they saw the second half of the show and they saw like 10 pieces in there. And they're going, well, if there's 10 more pieces and all those pieces took that long, I'm never getting out of here. So they hit their dissatisfied button and automatically rejected the rest of the group and they went to the exits. It's the only time I'd ever seen that before. Now, I'd seen something close a couple of years previously. I was at school in Chicago and I went down to see the Chicago Symphony. And this was like 1995 and Daniel Barenboim was the conductor. And the first half, they did this Beethoven piano concerto and it was a packed house. And at the end of the first half, everyone seemed to leave. The second half, the whole hall was empty. And I loved it. It was just great Bartok selection to end the show. So when I asked the ushers, I said, what happened? They said, oh yeah, that's normal. That's what happens here. We program some of the things people wanted at the start of the show, and then people left to go to the bars and the restaurants to close out their evening. So that was really interesting to hear. So as we get back to our stories and things, trying to figure out these exciters and how we can help build our brand and expand our reach as musicians, whether it be for our show as we develop our school programs for our middle schoolers, our high schoolers, our college programs, or our professional jobs. Now, if you focus on the basics and you sell what you're cooking with all of your great musical expression and your stage presence and your communication techniques, you can get to that exciter level with your performances and really gain in the marketplace. People will start to recognize you because of the special things that you do on stage. I'm thinking of a group called 10 Thing, and there's an awesome trumpet player that leads the group. And they all come out and they perform by memory. The tuba player sits at center stage and they work around her and have some movement. But man, the arrangements are so tasty and the performances are just so spot on. That's an example of how you can just sell music in such a high level. However, as we were talking about things earlier, things change over time, and you might have to look at how you might have to embrace more modern trends because people really expect something when they come to your show, the production of the show, because they're used to seeing things in their social media feeds. They're used to highly produced, no dead space. And it's awesome that they came and chose you, but there's a lot of competition for those eyeballs and ears, for that audience that came to see you. And you want to make sure that you give your best in lots of different ways. And you have to sort of go out of your way to make it really worth their while and overachieve or give them something that they weren't expecting. Again, you can hit these basics and you can be an outstanding performer and gain market share. But there are other things you can look at in the marketplace and try to figure out what you can do to make a difference. Now, sometimes that just might be with your programming. Maybe you'll just have some basic costume changes and things. I tell you, have you ever noticed how many sequins and stuff have come onto these groups with great performers? Doesn't matter if it's a opera soloist or if it happened to have started with Liberace or Elvis or Dolly Parton. There's something special about when a performer dresses to impress. A guy like Liberace, boy, I tell you what, he was focused on this great performance aspect and how he programmed music. And here was this virtuosic concert piano player, and he mixed in some really awesome pop classics at the start of television and things. I tell you what, though, Liberace did have some tough times. And this is a story from his brother, so I know it's true. And he said every couple of weeks, you'd see Liberace moping around. And at Liberace he looked really sad. And, then he'd take his bag and he left for that day and he'd take that bag and he'd cry all the way to the bank. Anyway, that's one of my favorite old jokes. I think it's really funny. But I'm a dad and I'm old, so, those kind of things amuse me. Now, the things that you do hopefully do give you some great recognition, and whatever value you put on it, I hope that return on investment is as impressive as a Liberace or a Kenny G or some of those great orchestras around the world. Now, the cool thing about multimedia is that we can sort of look around and see what everyone else is doing. Now, we don't have to do everything. We might not have the skill sets to do everything, but we can check some things that are impressive and we can sort of make a checklist and go, that's cool. That's really cool too. I know on Instagram, if I see someone doing something cool on stage, I just sort of save it so I can sort of go and look at it later. I mean, that's how I discovered groups like 10 Thing. I discovered another person, Lindsey Sterling. You're so busy in the musical world. As you look around, you're going, wow, I didn't know they were doing that. Oh, that's really awesome too. Man, can you believe that they did that in their show? And sometimes it's just subtle or just the way that they nod their head or engage their crowd. But, great arrangements, great performances, great staging presence, great way to tell stories. And those are the kind of things you're trying to take. Maybe turn of the century. I remember Blue Man Group and stuff. And those things were really impressive and clever. Not only you had great artistry, but you just had a lot of comedy. It was really cool. But now everybody seems to be adding these elements. When you go back and look at old videos from the 20s and 30s and the 40s, it turns out all these performers have been doing this all along. And then you think back upon your whole lifetime of performances you've seen, the things that make a difference when they communicated to you and it hit you right there in the heart. And it could have just been that special nod or that special motion that they made on stage or some sort of great light show or a video to capture that special, special moment. I remember playing shows all around the country using the Nimrod part of the Enigma Variations by Elgar. And someone smart took a letter written by a mother in Alaska about her soldier. And the point of the story was reminding people that a soldier was more than a number. They were a person. They were this mother's son. And boy, it was emotional. And I'm telling you, every time we did it, it wasn't a dry eye in the house on stage or in the audience. It was just a fantastic way to program and give an exciter while having this great piece of art that we were performing. And so there are always ways that you can figure out how to connect and be more human with that crowd. So as you look at things and you figure out trends and things that you might want to do, you got to make sure that you check to see how everybody is using things. I think multimedia is one thing that can't be overstated. You can see this has grown so much from contemporary American churches that routinely have video integrated into their worship events. In the same way, you see movement. And I tell you, movement really appears to be trending in a positive direction for the modern musician. In a similar thought, presentations using multiple art disciplines is becoming more and more common. I recently saw on social media that a performance was done on a consortium I'm a part of with an English composer. Her name's Jenny Watson, and she's just awesome. And this other consortium member was in Australia, and she had a live painting that was completed at the same time that the performance was being done. I don't know about you, but that might be an exciter to me because I think that would be pretty cool. There are so many ways to bring exciters or things to enhance your program that might really communicate well with the audience. A local flute player ended up using a dancer in context of her performance. She also used movement and choreography as it synchronized this artistic, poetic, and truly beautiful expression of this piece. Now, the peculiar thing you're going to have to do when you design your show, you're going to have to base it on why you're performing, where you're performing, who you're performing for, and to what end you're trying to perform. But I really like looking at pros for examples, and there's this entire city full of performers. It's called Branson, Missouri. And that's one of my favorite places in the whole world to vacation. And there are standards and norms seemingly for every show. It seems like there's always some sort of Americana tribute. They usually have some sort of tribute to veterans. But when you have these exciters at these events that can really engage with the audience, now you have people coming back season after season, and they're buying your merchandise and they're buying your products and you're following you on social media. They've become real fans. One group's exciters might be a light show. And now that same show, the Hay Goods, is using drones. And they still use, maybe old school, using cables where the performer can fly in. In one show, I've seen live animals run through the auditorium. Another show might be emotionally engaging in such a way because of that story that needs to be told. Another might be doing comedy because sometimes the way to someone's heart is through laughter. Another funny one, and there's a legendary performer, and his name is Shoji. And he just recently passed away. He's a violinist. And when he built his concert hall in Branson, he built it for the customer. He built these lavish bathrooms, and the audience would talk about them, and they would buy tickets and go back again and again so that they can show their friends these lavish restrooms. Intermission was a treat. It's a great joy because they were large and lavish, nothing like anything you've seen at a typical sporting event or a concert event. You know, when you talk about planning, that's pretty awesome to forward think to the building of the space that you're performing in just to make sure that the customers are taken care of in an excited manner that way. And in addition to that, boy, he had a quick wit, and boy, his violin playing in his show was just excellent. Now, I've seen so many success stories and a variety of people out there that make a living in Branson. And sure, many people, because of their norms, you know, they're using social media and they're engaging new audiences and things like that. And one of them is this top-notch show. They're called the Petersons. And I remember seeing them when they were just young kids at Silver Dollar City. And they were just honing their craft. In fact, they had a lot of room to grow on. But they paid attention to the audience and their response. They paid attention to how they performed and their showmanship and the things that would be those dissatisfiers, satisfiers, and exciters. And every day, they just went back and they performed again and again, and they honed their craft and they overcame all these obstacles. And they engaged with their audience. And now they have this legion of followers on YouTube. And now they're doing international tours. And it's just a really awesome, awesome success story. Now, I remember asking a group called the Haygoods, who I just really love. It's just so dynamic and engaging. And I remember asking Dominic, who's one of the older brothers, and I said, well, how'd you get so good? And what were you focused on? What were you thinking about the customers? And he said, we just have been doing it since we're 8 years old. We just sort of do it. And isn't that wild that some of these folks that have just been doing it or have all these hard knock skills developed over time, they don't really have to think about these dissatisfiers, citers, and exciters. Sometimes they just get it because they know, because the crowd keeps coming. And if something doesn't work, they take it out of the show, they put something in, they go, yep, that worked. And so sometimes by trial and error and repetition, you're going to hone your craft. I know I'm a much better performer, thousands of performances into my career, than what I was when I started out as a young kid. That's about it for now. I hope you found this quick look at the Kano model useful, and I hope you can use it as you sort of brainstorm how you're going to develop your shows, because you got to understand what the voice of the customer is and what your audience member really wants to see as you design and prepare for your next show. That's it for today's episode. We hope that some of the topics and issues addressed today will be useful to you as you move forward in your musical journey. I want to take this opportunity to say thank you for joining us today. We know your time is precious, and we really appreciate that you have taken the time to listen to us today. Consequently, we'd like to hear from each and every one of you. You can reach out and connect with us at intentionalmusicianship.com. My hope is that we build a community where we can encourage one another through our mutual experiences performing live music. I look forward to connecting with each of you again on the next episode of Intentional Musicianship.